Where are you from? A seemingly straightforward question, but one that carries the weight of centuries of human history, echoing with the whispers of ancestors and the footprints they left behind. For many, the answer is simple, connected to a single place on the map and a lineage traced through generations. But for others, it is more elusive, a dance between multiple worlds. In a world shaped by borders and boundaries, we are defined by the lands we inhabit, the cultures we inherit, and the stories we carry within us. But beneath the surface is a tapestry woven from threads of countless narratives, each thread a testament to the complexity of human identity. When you meet someone for the first time, especially someone who looks or sounds different, it is very likely that you will ask them where they're from. On the surface level, this is a question we ask out of genuine curiosity, or to establish common ground, or to celebrate diversity and foster cultural understanding. But this question is actually much more complex than we think. There are a lot of layers to it. It not only reflects cultural curiosity, but also ingrained assumptions about societal norms and stereotypes, race, ethnicity, diversity, and belonging. It is much more than just a geographical inquiry. It is a gateway to understanding who a person actually is. For a lot of people, the answer is simple, just tied to a place where they were born or a place where they were raised. But for others whose identities transcend national borders or cultural boundaries, people who have moved around a lot, people who have mixed heritage or identify with multiple cultures, they may grapple with the complexity of their identities, trying to figure out which part of their identity to highlight or how best to convey their sense of belonging. But also for individuals who don't fit into those neatly organized categories that society hands out, or people who have suffered discrimination because of their perceived identities or even their immigration status, the question can actually serve as a reminder of their status as outsiders or others within their own communities. And what about people born in countries that no longer exist or cultures that are facing genocide or erosion? I have learned that this question can actually be really difficult for people, which is ironic because we all come from somewhere, right? But it is a question we have to approach with sensitivity. The context and the manner of asking matters. Where are you from?
So I'm from Germany, and I've been in London for 5 years now.
I am from Bermuda, born and raised there, and my dad is Bermudian and my mom is from Finland and Ghana.
I'm from New Zealand and Fiji.
So originally from France.
I'm from Bermuda. I was born and raised there. However, my mom is from Ghana and is a quarter Finnish.
Oh wow.
I'm sorry. She's half Finnish, so I'm a quarter Finnish.
Interesting. And do you consider Bermuda your home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you consider Germany your home, or do you consider London your home?
I think I consider London my home now, because my partner and I recently bought property here, and I think that was very cementing. I'm a Londoner now, and when we bought the property, we were kind of thinking, do we see ourselves here in the next 5 years? And we both said yes, so London is my home now.
Are your parents also from Germany?
They are, yeah.
Do you consider France your home?
I used to, but I would say that after having been there for 7-8 years, I feel more Londonian than French, and even the way I speak and think has changed.
Are your parents also from France?
No, from Lebanon.
Ah, from Lebanon?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm kind of I feel myself as 3 nationalities now instead of just one. I wouldn't consider myself just French, just the way people speak and talk, the difference in just the language itself is very different.
Do you consider New Zealand or Fiji your home?
More New Zealand. I've lived longer there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you in the UK for a holiday? Are you living here now? Or studying?
I live here, yeah. Okay. I've lived here for the last 6 years.
Awesome. Yeah. So do you consider this your home at all? Or do you still, if someone asks you, would you still say definitely New Zealand is your home?
It's probably say New Zealand.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Are your parents also from New Zealand?
My mum is, my dad is from Fiji.
And do you consider Bermuda your home?
I do consider Bermuda my home. I've lived in London now, or England now, for just over 10 years. But I still consider Bermuda my home. Go back every year and it definitely feels like going home.
The human need for belonging is a fundamental part of our existence as social beings. From our earliest ancestors forming tribes for survival to modern day communities and social networks, the whole quest for belonging shapes our relationships, identities, and sense of self. We seek out spaces where we feel understood, valued, comfortable enough to be ourselves, whether that be in our families or social groups or cultural communities, because these spaces serve as a sort of anchor and support for us to truly be who we are. However, for people who are navigating multiple identities or marginalized communities, the search for belonging can be quite challenging, as they may face discrimination, exclusion, or even a sort of disconnection from their culture. And the thing we have to remember is that the search for belonging is closely intertwined with our sense of purpose and finding meaning in life. Whether it's through shared interests, shared goals, or even shared struggles, belonging to something greater than yourself gives your life meaning and purpose. And ultimately, the search for belonging is a deeply personal, ongoing journey, so everybody's version of that will be different. Identity is a multifaceted construct influenced by a lot of things. Your culture, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, religion, gender, sexuality, there's so much involved. And even though the question, where are you from, might seem quite simple, it doesn't really capture all the layers that make up a person's sense of self. I believe that each person carries within them a unique amalgamation of identities that have been shaped by their personal experiences. For instance, there are people who identify both as conservative and progressive, Israeli and Palestinian, or even religious and LGBTQ+. Whether it makes sense to us or not, it just goes to show that people are juggling these intersecting identities that shape their worldview. The concept of identity is not this static thing, it is fluid and evolving. People may navigate between these different aspects of their identity depending on the context, and they will usually adapt their behaviors or expressions to fit societal expectations or personal circumstances. But it gets more complicated when we bring cultural hybridity into the mix, especially in today's globalized world. As people migrate and cultures blend and borders get blurry, people will find themselves floating through multiple cultural worlds, each with its own set of customs, values, and norms. Now, this fusion of cultures can help to enrich your identity, but it can also leave you feeling a bit lost. Identity is also heavily intertwined with social hierarchies and power dynamics. Certain identities may be privileged or marginalized in society, which does affect how people view them or interact with them. If you are born American, for example, there is an assumption of power and stability there. Whereas if you are born Syrian, you don't get the same luxury. And that sort of intersectionality right there really just highlights the importance of knowing how the world works and the implications that that can have on social justice and equity movements. But that is a whole other conversation for another time.
How connected do you feel to your cultural roots?
I do still feel connected. I think it is harder once you've lived somewhere else for a long time. There's stuff happening in the country that you have to work a lot harder to keep up with what's going on there. And I think sometimes going back, the struggles that people are facing, not seeing it every day, you can feel a little bit disconnected, but I try my best to make sure I keep up with everything there.
I feel a lot closer to my New Zealand side than my Fijian side, I think, because I've spent more time there.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
No, and I mean a little bit, but I would say that in order to integrate better and just like French people are more frank, whereas English does we smooth everything and you're very polite, and also it has to be different.
I feel quite connected. However, I feel like in comparison to living there and living here, there's a completely big difference in terms of like many different aspects. Like there's more opportunity here.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I don't know, I'm more driven here in different ways, but like that's always my home. It's just here helps me elevate a bit more in where I want to be in my life.
I don't think I do. You know, I feel like I've been out of Germany for a while now. Before I moved to the UK, I lived in Denmark. So I have now like reached a point where I go back to Germany and I feel a bit detached from it.
Right.
And I can't really, I think, relate anymore. And also when I'm there, I don't really get like cultural jokes and like stuff that's going on because I can't really keep up with sort of what's going on in Germany and the UK as well. So I'm sort of focusing on UK.
So that's why you see the UK as more of your home now.
I think so, yeah. It's because I'm consuming like the media here. All my friends are British, my partner's British, which is why I think, yeah, I'm very much like here now. I'm focusing on the UK.
One interesting aspect of societal expectations is the tendency to categorize individuals based on superficial markers like ethnicity, race, or even accent. And of course, this leads to stereotyping where individuals are just reduced to basically caricatures based on perceived national or cultural traits. Someone with certain characteristics can be considered foreign or exotic, regardless of where they were even born or brought up. Societal expectations often create a lot of pressure for individuals to conform or act in a way that will be seen as consistent with a certain culture or nationality. And the "where are you from" question can also highlight the interesting notion of the perpetual foreigner, particularly for individuals from marginalized or diasporic communities. Despite being born in a certain country, they could still be perceived as outsiders just based on their appearance or cultural heritage or their documentation. I always think back to my time in the US and how my immigration category was resident alien. A resident alien being someone who lives in the US but isn't an American citizen. And obviously every country has this, it's not just the US. But there's just something interesting about the language resident alien. It just reminds you that no matter what you do, no matter how much you've contributed to the economy, as long as you do not have the passport of that country, you are still an outsider. You don't belong. And there are a lot of countries where you have foreigners who have lived there maybe their whole life, or at least the majority of their life, but they're still regarded as expats or foreigners because they don't have the passport of that country, even if that country is all they know to be home. This ongoing or perpetual questioning of whether you belong or not can actually have some significant psychological effects, because in some ways it erases your sense of identity and belonging, and you might just end up feeling lost. I watched this interesting TED Talk by writer Taye Selassie where she challenges the conventional question of "where are you from?" and proposes a more nuanced approach to understanding identity.
What if we asked, instead of "where are you from?" "where are you a local?" This would tell us so much more about who and how similar we are. Tell me you're from France and I see what? A set of cliches. Adichie's dangerous single story, the myth of the nation of France. Tell me you're a local of Fez and Paris, better yet, Goutte d'Or, and I see a set of experiences. Our experience is where we're from.
She also argues that identity is not fixed by geography, but is fluid and influenced by relationships and lived experiences. I find this really interesting because I think one thing we're really good at doing in the world is boxing people into categories that make sense, not necessarily to them, but to us, and maybe even to others. But with how diverse the world is and just the sheer variation of lived experiences, in some scenarios, those boxes just do not work. And I think what we need is a shift in perspective. Something that allows us to move beyond these narrow labels and stereotypes, which will allow us to engage with one another in a more empathetic and authentic way. I think in confronting societal expectations and stereotypes, it is important to challenge assumptions and develop a more nuanced and inclusive understanding of identity. And this means actively listening to people sharing about their lived experiences, recognizing the diversity within communities, and resisting the urge to reduce people to simplistic labels or categories. We all have these biases within us, and they're not necessarily bad, but it always helps to keep them in check and remind yourself that what you think may not necessarily be what is actually the case. I think by keeping this in the back of our minds, we will be able to cultivate understanding and empathy, and that will allow us to create spaces where everybody feels welcome and respected for who they are. Everyone should be proud of where they come from or where they've had their lived experiences, and nobody should ever be made to feel ashamed or embarrassed of the people and the places that mean everything to them.
How do you feel when someone asks you where you're from?
Good. I'm excited to share my experience and my side. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think people are just like curious. Also, I have a strong accent, so everyone, I just need to say like a word, and everyone's like, "Where are you from?" and "Where's like where are you really from?" So yeah, I'm not like offended or anything. I think it's like a fair enough question. So yeah, I don't think it makes me feel like a certain way. I think people are just curious, aren't they?
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually, I'm not really sure what to answer. Like, do they want the ethnicity? Do they want the root?
Yeah.
Do they want what I feel like now? Yeah. It's difficult. Yeah.
I don't mind it as a question. I think especially in London, I obviously have a different accent. It's a question that I get a lot. And it's fun telling people you're from Bermuda.
Yeah.
Half of them have never heard of it. Half of them are like, "Oh, the triangle." So yeah, it's a fun conversation. I don't mind it.
I feel excited to talk about it because, yeah, it's part of who I am, and London is such a melting pot of different cultures. So it's quite nice to be able to, give a different perspectives from different parts of the world.